On the 16th of July, 2022, a woman by the name of Graves quickly made her way to the bedroom and opened the door to find her husband Frank, who was peacefully sleeping on the bed. She crouched down under the bed and retrieved her personal box, which contained all the knives she had meticulously collected over the years. She selected one of them, stood up, walked towards her husband, and raised the knife with both hands. Several hours later, the police discovered Frank's body with numerous stab wounds, making it appear as though a monstrous entity had attacked him. Who is she, and what drove her to commit such a crime? Video today will discuss a woman who followed crime content online and became a criminal herself. She was born in 1996 in a town called Havant, which is in the west of England. It's a beautiful town full of lovely places, but although the place she lived in was beautiful, her home life was not. It was filled with abuse. The kinds of situations she faced at school weren't good either, as she was constantly bullied by her classmates. One reason was that she was somewhat eccentric during her school days, adopting a goth style. But the second reason that made her a target for bullying was something that was honestly provocative, which was that she had problems. Throughout her life, she had to use hearing aids because of her hearing problem. It started when she was 11 years old and she was partially deaf, so some of her classmates targeted her because of this. They would say she couldn't hear well, and this of course affected her mental state. She also started doing things that I don't want to go into detail about here, but she began to harm herself. At the age of 13, they took her to a psychiatrist and she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. To explain it briefly for those who don't know, you go through a period of depression, followed by another period where you're in a different state. She was in a state they call mania, very happy at times, with rapid thoughts and a lot of energy. You feel like you've solved the world's problems. Sometimes you don't even sleep for long periods and make impulsive decisions as it's described. In general, one of the things Shay was obsessed with was always complaining, which also became her nickname among her friends. As I mentioned, her childhood wasn't good, and unfortunately, when a child is exposed to various forms of abuse, they might learn some of these behaviors themselves. Due to her depression and psychological issues, Shay was known for manipulating her friends. One of her friends named Vicky says that Shay and another girl named Lauren had a very strange friendship. She admired Shay's personality and saw her as a role model, which Shay exploited to her advantage. We'll learn the details shortly, but regarding Shay's childhood, as long as she lived at her parents' house, the abuse didn't stop during her teenage years. She had enough and decided to run away. Without money or relatives, she slept at her friends' houses, moving from one friend's house to another. Each time, she would start a relationship with one of the friends she stayed with, which would turn violent and end with her being kicked out. In simple terms, she found herself without a home, and subsequently she began using drugs and developed an addiction, which is unfortunately not uncommon, particularly in situations like these. When she reached the age of 20, an event occurred that altered the trajectory of her life permanently. At the age of 20, Shay met a young man named Ashley, and their relationship unfolded rapidly. You do not wish to hasten into a romantic relationship, correct? You can locate a place to reside, and fortunately for her, their relationship was quite positive. She encountered this emotion for the initial time, being in a healthy relationship, not one of those toxic or violent ones she was accustomed to. And within a brief period, she became pregnant. Naturally, pregnancy is extremely significant because pregnancy itself is regarded as such.
It's somewhat a sacrifice, you know?
In the majority of situations, it is generally regarded as a sacrifice. Much like when you are on the verge of becoming a parent, you feel an obligation to do so. Someone besides myself is endeavoring to enhance your life in order to establish a better future for your child. And indeed, her pregnancy was akin to a golden opportunity that enabled her to progress. The new circumstances compelled her to do everything within her power for her child. She ceased most of her detrimental habits, including self-harm, conquered her addiction issues, and resolved to schedule an appointment with a psychiatrist or psychologist. She initiated therapy sessions, during which she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder after enduring 9 months of pregnancy. The great effort that came with it led to her giving birth to her child in 2017, and she became a mother. It is said that she was a good mother, and all the effort she put into her psychological treatment benefited her. She loved her child immensely and was on a good path for herself and her child. Unfortunately, this didn't last long, which is truly frustrating. Some people have problems in their lives, not necessarily because they made mistakes, and you hope to see them improve, right? This is what we always hope for as humans. I mean, I don't know, stories of people who started off poorly and then improved. It spread and attracted a lot of people because we all want to think about this thing. We want to believe that no matter how bad our situation is, we can be okay, and in the end, we will be able to overcome most problems. These problems between her and Ash increased to the point where she decided to take her child and leave the house. So she and her child spent most of their days homeless, and after Ashley, they stayed in a women's shelter. During that time, she reconnected with her teenage friend Lauren, the girl who used to manipulate and exploit her, whom she also used to manipulate and exploit. Lauren also had a child, close in age to her child, and both of them were. They were both single mothers, so they decided to live together. It seemed like a good idea. Since you have a child, I have a child, it would be easier for us to live in the same house. But unfortunately, it wasn't easier for them. Things got worse. Even though she tried to get better before her child was born, unfortunately, it's not easy. The traumas and psychological issues that begin in childhood are somewhat insidious. This is just my opinion, by the way, but the metaphor I like to use for this topic is a monster. You manage to put it in a cage due to, what they call therapy and a good routine and all those things. She managed to do this. She was able to keep the monster of psychological trauma inside a cage, locked with a strong metal lock. And although she tried to improve before giving birth due to psychological treatment, when she gave birth, she found the situation heavier than she expected. Even the healthiest and most aware people are surprised by the difficulty of motherhood and fatherhood. Suddenly your focus becomes poor. There's suddenly many worries you couldn't imagine facing, and pressure after pressure, of course. Not to mention the cases of depression that some mothers face. After giving birth, the pressures were enough to unlock the cage I had put the monster in, and it began to emerge. It was enough to bring life back, something the situation was good. Here we start talking about the relationship between Shai and Lauren and what was strange about it and what manipulation was happening. At some point when you read about this topic, you will discover that Shu treated Lauren as if she were her maid. She made her perform all the household chores, from washing dishes and clothes, sometimes lighting her cigarettes, and even putting on her socks, along with a significant amount of manipulation. To the extent that Shu installed surveillance cameras throughout the entire house, even in Lauren's personal bedroom, she would observe her in sensitive situations as a method of control. For she, the notion of controlling or observing someone without their awareness was something that fueled her in a peculiar and dreadful manner. Speaking of peculiar and dreadful, the psychological issues lead us to the time that impacted everyone when individuals genuinely faced psychological challenges, which was during the pandemic in the year 2020. That period, the significant amount of pressure exacerbated Shi's issues. Her vulnerability, along with her terrifying aspect, was intensified by her newfound fascination with true crime material. She consumed video clips, podcasts, and even documentaries available on Netflix regarding criminal activities. Her interest wasn't merely driven by curiosity about the crimes themselves. She also idolized the criminals featured in the content she followed. She became an ardent admirer of theirs, viewing them as brilliant, unacknowledged geniuses. She even went to the extent of plastering their photographs on her bedroom walls and purchasing knives and daggers, almost as if when you become a devoted fan of a particular series or something similar, you might purchase a figurine. However, there exists a significant issue here, which is the topic of fans who become admirers of criminals. This truly warrants an entire video because it is such an unusual and perplexing topic. There are numerous individuals who are fans of killers, even going so far as to write to them while they are incarcerated, demonstrating just how immense of fans they are. I find it quite baffling. Anyway, let's proceed. In February of the year 2022, she encountered an individual named Frankie Fitzgerald, who was 25 years old, and in their first encounter, she realized he would be her life partner due to the amount of similarity between them. They had the same hobbies and interests, and I'm not talking about crimes or true crime, but other strange things like drugs and violence. However, I'm not talking about violence, but rather the portrayal of violence, let's say for sexual reasons. Frankie is also a father and has 2 children from a previous woman. During her meeting with him, she returned to her addiction with him, and although their relationship started well, it eventually turned to violence. Not fake violence, but real violence. Their relationship started to deteriorate after both of them began accusing each other of infidelity. You remember the issue with the cameras all over the house? She used them as a threat against him. She said she would release them and expose him because some of these videos seemed like he was abusing her even though they were acting. The situation reached an unbelievably ugly level. Both were accusing each other of cheating. One night after they finished arguing, Frankie went to sleep and she took the opportunity to go through his phone and saw that he was talking to a girl who was 3 years old. A year, yes, at that moment, she chose something that would ruin her life forever. She went to their room, her heart racing. She went under the bed and pulled out a box full of knives and daggers, things she had bought due to her obsession with true crime stories. She took them in her hand, looked at Frank as he slept, and started the attack. She stabbed him 22 times while screaming. After she finished, she realized what she had done, recalling all the things she had heard about in true crime content. Those thoughts started coming to her. We always hear about these stories. How? That criminals get arrested? So she knew she had to find an alibi for being absent from the crime scene. But she also thought she got rid of the body, cleaned all traces from the room, and sent a message to her ex-boyfriend pretending she was going to his place, claiming she had been with him all night, but she hadn't done that. She was really confused because after her message to the guy, she also contacted Vicky and said that Frankie had left the house. Then she contacted Lauren, told her the whole story, confessed that she killed him, and asked her to come help her. Afterward, they got rid of the body. Lauren came and helped her, and while they were around the body, she called Vicky on a video call and showed her the body, but Vicky didn't react as expected. Instead, she screamed and called the police. It wasn't as she expected. Instead, she screamed and called the police. The law enforcement officers arrived approximately 6 hours subsequent to the crime, entered the premises, and were immediately met with a potent odor, a scent reminiscent of cleaning products. They hurried to the bedroom to scrutinize Vicky's report and discovered the murder weapon in the kitchen sink. She asserted it was an act of self-defense, but subsequent forensic analysis disclosed it to be a falsehood. 7 months following the arrest, the trial commenced, and a substantial amount of evidence was introduced. Numerous recorded clips were dismissed, whether from this camera or the surveillance cameras installed within the residence. The clips had also been manipulated by Shah to create a misleading appearance. Innocent, and that she was allegedly abused or something like that, but they proved that all these clips were fake, or at least the violence in them was fake. It's strange how we talk about her, and in the end, they sentenced her to life imprisonment. Where is it? Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The topic is about consuming this content and how it might affect things on a larger scale. It reminds me of the days when they used to say video games or PlayStation games, especially war games and such, influence people and make them want to commit these crimes. I don't agree, not at all. I think I've read about this topic before, but a long time ago studies talked about sleep proving the opposite of this, so it's not necessarily true. If you watch a television series focusing on criminal activities and similar themes, or engage in a game involving firearms and related elements, you're likely to commit these acts. I believe most of you are quite aware that this is a very old narrative. I feel as though I'm blowing dust off as I discuss it, yet individuals consistently avoid the complete picture. Specifically in this particular case, she experienced numerous terrible things, or at least events from her childhood and such, that significantly influenced her mind, her psyche, and her perspective of the world. Additionally, I am somewhat biased because I create videos about this topic. I could be wrong. I hope I'm not. I aim to be fair in these things.